Climate change has been dubbed a mega risk in scientific literature. No one in particular has caused it, yet it affects everyone. Rising average temperatures on Earth due to greenhouse gas emissions, as well as decreasing snow cover and rising sea levels, have had a tangible and visual effect on human societies, and a wide range of business sectors including agriculture, energy, fishing, forestry, winery, and tourism sectors. This video seeks to reflect upon the effects of global warming and economy through two examples that are the ski industry in Australia and energy production in the western US. Ultimately, we aim to propose a potential policy that would help mitigate economic losses due to global emissions by keeping a check on negative externalities while ensuring sustainable growth. Global ski industry, which has also been identified as snow tourism, is a premier economic target affected by rising mean temperatures as it directly represents the physical availability of snowpacks. The snowpacks are of high social and economic importance, especially in lower altitudes where the temperatures are higher along with the risk of melting. Water lasts all winter in the form of snowpacks only to melt in spring and summer and provide societies with water when rainfall is less common. Aside from acting as a temporary water storage unit, snowpacks are the main required resource for skiing and snowboarding. In a research, the scientists at the University of Sydney studied 10 ski resorts in the Australian Alps in Victoria and New South Wales regions, where average lower elevations and slopes make them even more sensitive to the annual snowfall. Based on the projections, even at an optimistic level of 0.6 degrees Celsius temperature rise with no change in precipitation, almost half of the ski resorts in Australia are projected not to be financially viable by year 2070. Due to 20 to 40% more snowmelt. However, in the worst case scenario of 3 degrees Celsius temperature rise, the same statistic goes up all the way to 100% for the whole ski industry in Australia to face a literal meltdown. Given the average economic output of the snow tourism industry, these numbers translate to somewhere between $2.5 to $5 billion of revenue loss on an annual basis. Of course, snowpack loss can be mitigated to some extent using adaptation strategies such as artificial snowmaking, ticket price reduction, or construction of newer resorts in higher terrain. But all these options are more or less costly and not sustainable. Another example of the effects of climate change on the economy can be seen in the electric power supply industry of western United States. The increasing incidence of extreme heat and drought alone are expected to reduce further electricity generation capacity. In 2015, a research by the Arizona State University concluded that due to the long-term changes in the stream flow, air temperature, water temperature, humidity, and air density over the next decades, the efficiency of power plants is going to decrease notably, which in turn reduces the output capacity of these plants. Of course, different power generation technologies are susceptible to different magnitudes of vulnerability, but on average, climate change is likely to reduce summertime generation capacity by 1 to 3%, with further reductions of up to 7 to 8% under the worst case of a 10-year drought scenario. Given that the current summertime output capacity of the power plants in the western United States is about 200 gigawatts, at an average electricity price of 13 cents per kilowatt hour, this translates into a direct loss of $2 to $18 billion a year. And that's for the western United States only. As expected, technologies that rely on combustion, such as steam and coal turbines in which generating capacity is linked to air temperature and available stream flow, take the greatest hits from the rising temperature. Surprisingly, however, usable photovoltaic solar capacity is also decreasing as a result of warmer climate. As it appears, wind and hydropower are the only technologies not to undergo decreases in capacity. Further, aside from affecting the direct output of power plants, the inconsideration of climate change and efficiency of power plants would indirectly affect the projections of planning reserve margins, the percentage representation of electricity supply left over after meeting demand. In case of prolonged periods of drought, power providers could be overestimating the planning margin of security by 20 to 25%. With the same price as before, this means about $500 million worth of electricity may be wasted in the period of just one summer. This unaccountability shows that our present energy forecasts are overly optimistic, and it is just a matter of time before the visible effects of this market failure start surfacing. Whether these changes in climate are man-made or not, one thing is certain: they are causing a substantial revenue loss. To understand the reason why changes in the environment lead to economic revenue loss, requires the interaction between economy, population, and the environment to be studied. Let's assume an ideal wonderland in which population growth is solely dependent on the society's income and their available natural resources. The rate of natural resources consumption or pollution increases as the population increases, and decreases as pollution control measures are taken into place. These pollution countermeasures can range all the way from the nature's self-purification abilities to elaborate economic schemes. Finally, the economic growth of this wonderland is dependent on the population and the natural resources, of course, with both contributing to the economic growth. Right off the bat, the conflict of interest is evident in such a world. The increase in economic growth requires more manpower and natural resources, but results in the consumption of natural stock, which in turn reduces population and with that the economic growth. Normally, the society uses the natural resources to expand and make more profit. Meanwhile, the population increases, which further puts pressure on the natural stocks. Normally, the self-purification abilities of nature help keep it at a steady level. But when the consumption passes some threshold, self-purification just can't keep up with the pollution rate, and the natural stocks start falling rapidly. This, in turn, causes the economy to crash as a result. Now, suppose environmental taxes are introduced with the hope of reducing pollution. Each unit of tax will contribute in reducing the total amount of pollution, at the cost of reducing economic output at the same time. However, the effects of tax on economic output are by a scale factor lower than the pollution rate, as preventing pollution is often less costlier than containing it. Also, the tax can be allocated towards developing newer green energy technologies, which may be economically beneficial. With tax implemented, our contributions to the environment ensure that the natural stocks at any given moment are higher than the previous scenario, and the nature's self-purification ability can actually improve the situation rather than contain it. Since the natural stocks are available all the time, the economy continues to flourish, and the previous failure point never occurs. This happens at the cost of a slightly slower growth pace and requires more time for its rewards to be evident. This simple representation of the interaction between economy and environment is known as the Wonderland model. There is no denying that this model is a very simplistic representation of the interaction between the economy, nature, and population in the real world. But it shows the importance of giving back to nature's share of economic profit to reduce the market externalities. These countermeasures can range all the way from simply reducing the pollution rate by improving the technology, or paying any form of green tax or green fees. Whether global warming is man-made or not is a topic of further debates. But one thing is evident: it causes damages to the economy. Nevertheless, with enough time, will, and a smart allocation of funds, it can be overcome. The nature has been provided for us free of charge. The least we can do is to pay it some respect.